This is National Chess Master Ra8. I'm here at chess.com to submit a game submitted by White. Pump the volume 247. This was a tournament game he played in a university match against Oxford University, and it's a very interesting game. Let's have a look and see what comes of it. This is out of my member best game thread. Some people are posting their best games. Some are just posting games they want help in, and that's fine. I'll make a video of either one, but you got to get them in before I get caught up. Then the thread's locked down and no more. I'm got to move on to other things to help the group. Okay, so he plays the 4-pawn attack against the King's Indian defense, and you'll see what the 4-pawn attack is here. There's 3 pawns. We just need one more, right? Which one are we going to pick? How about this one? See, 4-pawn attack. Okay. It's not as popular as you might think. You know, you'd think that, wow, this is impressive. White's getting his 4 pawns rolling. What are the drawbacks with it? Well, White's not developing pieces. Okay. Also, Black can counter that center in a number of ways, and one will be to push c5 and start trying to crack it apart. It's certainly double-edged, and if you're going to play the King's Indian defense, you need to learn how to face it, and all the defenses are beyond the scope of this video. You guys got to learn something on your own. I can't show you everything. Okay, so there's a lot of different sub-variations. White has put some notes in here. I've skipped them. Let's see. He spent a minute on d4. He was tempted to play b3 and almost couldn't decide. And then he started to regret d4. And then he was wishing he'd played b3 because he'd never beaten the King's Indian in a rated game before. Okay, so now he's got the, with 5f4, officially a 4-pawn attack, the best remedy against the King's Indian defense. Well, it might be. I don't know. I don't play the King's Indian. So there's a lot of things I don't know about chess because I don't need to know them. It's the whole essence of my program. Specialize in what you need to know. Don't waste your time on other stuff. Okay. Anyway, he gave bishop g4 a dubious move, and he was happy to see it because he could get rid of the light-squared bishop, which is usually the piece to crash through first in Black's attack. Well, that's true. In a lot of variations of the King's Indian defense, that is Black's best piece. And usually it sits back home for a while. But anyway, this is if Black's launching a kingside attack of his own. Okay, so White breaks the pin. And as I said, here comes the counter in the center. And he spent a few minutes on d5 just making sure everything was in place. Well, yeah, it sure looks in place to me. Okay, so now... getting the wrong arrow. Okay, Black plays a6. He's going to flank attack the not 1 square, 2 square. Okay, he's going to do a flank attack against flank attack against the White center. Okay, so at least Black has a plan. You got to have a plan. You know, Black's playing for a pawn break b5. What other pawn breaks does Black have? Potentially e6 and maybe potentially f5. What are White's pawn breaks? e5 is the main one he wants. b4, surprisingly, get that arrow right. a3 and b4 is a potential pawn break of White's. But both sides need to complete their development. Otherwise, if you break open the center, White could find his king in trouble. So let's get developed, okay? And that's what they're doing. Now White decides to make that bishop commit. Okay. As he has a note here, I had calculated a line where he sacks his, oops, too far. I calculated a line where he sacks his knight for my G and H pawns, and then I castle queenside, but I knew I was doing okay either way. So somehow we've gone way past where we wanted to be here. Hit the wrong button. Okay, so I guess he's saying if bishop h4, g4, and the bishop takes, and then the knight takes, and White's going to castle queenside and an attack. And I would agree that a piece for 2 pawns is a great advantage, especially when you're opening up the kingside lines to start attacking. Black shouldn't be doing such things. So one thing about the bishop to G4 move, you're pretty much committing to trading that off, and that bishop off. And to some degree, Black's got some freedom with his other bishop. It's got a long diagonal. He's got some pawns on dark squares. But at least it's got some mobility. The white bishop on f3 isn't all that useful of a piece right now for white. So, but then again, the black knights are not finding squares. To get full compensation for the bishop pair, you need your knights to get squares. Okay, so here he makes a note. Bishop pair now hand. Now I have to get developed and castled. Oh wow! Whoops! Hit the wrong buttons, and you see the final position before we get there. Okay, so bishop takes f3, and he asks. So white wants to get castled before he breaks open the center with e5. Okay, that makes sense. You do need to complete your development. And now black's preparing to push b5. And white notes his bishops are great. Well, they are and they aren't. They don't have a lot of mobility at this stage. Right now, white's just getting it developed so he can swing his queen rook over to the king side or wherever it wants to go, so that white can get that e5 break in mind. But at the moment, the bishops aren't doing a heck of a lot. It's basically because of this 4-pawn attack. Those 4 pawns are in the way of everything. Okay, and the black counterparts. Here, let me point them out. I'll just draw some arrows here. Well, heck with the arrows. Let's make them red. Okay, even though the pawns aren't locked, that's a barrier. And these pawns are locked, and this isn't, and this isn't. But they're making a barrier here. There's only a couple of inroad lines here, and okay, to get through those pawns, those diagonals. And right now, white's not poised to put his bishop on either one, nor is he able to get his knight somewhere. Where's a good outpost for the knight? If there really isn't one. And the same thing could be said true with the black knights. Where's a good outpost for the black knights? They don't really have one. So I think the game is still essentially pretty even, and it's going to stay this way for a while. Although white always has a little more boardroom, so we're going to give white a slight plus. Okay, so let's see. A nice move by my opponent, and his reply is basically forced. Probably, but yeah. A lot of times you'd like to be able to play b3 here, but there may be some tricks on this rook somewhere. B4 chases the knight. Got to be careful. So he takes, and now he chose the c file for his rook simply because it guards the queen. There's some positions where the queen might be hanging. I think more natural is to play it on e1, then start looking for a better square for the queen. But this works out. White's got some pleasant choices here. Okay, so black does what he can. He's got to get something going here, grab some space. And here he chose knight e2, where it has flexibility to go either way, although it doesn't really have flexibility to come to the queen side because d4, c3, and c1 are all off limits. 2 are on pre and 1 is blocked. But where else can it go? It could go to b1. That's not a bad choice, putting it on b1. The idea is that since white has the c4 square now, redeploy the knight to c4. That's a wonderful outpost for the knight. We've been talking earlier about how the knights don't have any squares. Well, here's one. Has black created a square for his knights yet? Kind of. Knight to b5, but how do you get there? That's a long process. It's got to get, okay, knight to b6, to c8, to a7, to b5. That's what, 4 moves? 1, 2, 3, 4. How about the other knight? Knight to e8, to c7, which means 3 moves. The queen has to move. It's not getting there any quicker. Oh yeah, it is. goes right to b5. So 4 moves. Anyway, and it's not all that clear that b5 is a great square. But there's not, you can't fault a move like knight e2, because his plan is he's seeing what he sees. He sees that his knight can go either way, and there's no guarantee those black pawns are going to stay there. So, but still, it aims to get over to the king side. It'd like to get to g3 and hopefully up to h5 or f5 if could be. So here he's got plans: a tour to f2 and g4 to save time. To A, save time. B, keep the rooks connected. And C, the knight is ready to jump to the side of the board. And D, I'm setting up something nice. Okay, he wants to get it to g4. Is that what he said? You can't see his notes here. Oh, I choose the square over D. Oh, his option was D1 was to go to F2 and to G4. But anyway, he's setting something up nice. We'll see what it is shortly. And here, White says he's just solidifying things. In other words, he's taking away some options of black pushing c4, and now a knight on b5 for black looks more inviting, because now c3 is a possible landing point for a knight, especially with that bishop on the long diagonal to support it. But black isn't poised to do it. He hasn't I showed it took about 4 moves to get a knight there. He hasn't done any of those moves. So black's not doing that. And now he goes back to a8, and he notes that he says nice to see now he's wasted 2 tempi with this rook. Well, he did spend 2 tempi with it, but the position has changed slightly. Now the rook belongs on the A file where it's got some pressure. So the fact that this rook on A8 is tying the queen down for the moment, it's not really losing a tempo. Even though the rook has moved twice. Let's stop and count development. Both sides have developed their queen and 3 minor pieces. White has both rooks developed, so does black. If anything, black's rooks look a little better here. I think black is close to full equality. White's still got more boardroom, but white's going to have to get creative here. And we'll see what happens. So black, okay, white played queen d2. I kind of hit that kind of quick. And now he's planning to double the rooks on the A file. That makes sense. But one drawback is this allows white this tempo move. I guess black needs to get the queen off that rank. And we'll see why. Knight d4. Now suddenly white's found an outpost for his knight. I was trying to get it to c4 earlier. Now it's going to find a nice one on c6. And now, actually, because of this, white has a slight advantage. But black's still close to equality. Plus, not only are we attacking and planning to stick a knight on c6, there's a threat to put it on b5. So black's got to deal with this. And he says, Boo-yah, my knight is going to c6, and there's nothing he can do. Well, he's got to deal with the fork first. Otherwise, black could counter with knight b8 to keep him out of c6. But got to deal with that first. So he goes here. Now the knight comes in. Now there's a threat on this square. And how to deal with that? Well, let's see. Rook e8 is safe and sound, but it takes the rook off the file. There might be a reason to keep it here. That leaves king f8 and bishop f8 to guard it. And here he notes a knight outpost, ace knight outpost, a dream square, and the bishop pair in hand. Now it's time. Okay, so black plays king f8. I guess he figures he wants to keep the bishop on the long diagonal. And now white comes through with his break because he's now supporting things. What can black do now? Okay, Here he strikes at just the right moment. All lines thoroughly calculated. Okay. What do you do when you're in a position like this? Now suddenly the white advantage has grown. What kind of plan can you come up with if you're black? If you keep sitting and rolling with the punches, there's a danger you're going to get squeezed to death. Sometimes you have to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak, and find some counterplay, anything. What else can what does black do, and what else could he do? Let's see what he plays first. I've got an idea here that I just thought of. Okay, he played knight e8. Okay, let's just suppose. Here's my idea. A little shaky. We're giving a c5 is becoming weak, but I have an idea here. I just want to test it out. This is the first time I've looked at it. How's white going to retake? My point is, no, it's not going to work. Darn it! I want to sack the exchange, but there's well, no, we can do it. Yeah, we can do it. Okay. The point is, if pawn takes, the rook comes over and takes. So what white needs to do is grab this rook, and then black takes this. Now, this is what I'm trying to set up, but there's obviously a flaw with it, and the flaw is c5 is hanging. Otherwise, black's picked up a pawn for the exchange, and the idea is that we're going to try to win that c6 pawn before it becomes a problem. But now black can't do this. But you've got to be able to analyze things and reject them. In other words, some people might not even consider giving up the exchange. Okay, and if it weren't for the fact that c5 is hanging here, this might be very playable for black. White's pawns are not mobile. The pawns on the queen side are locked, and he's got a pawn minority on the king side. If that pawn on c6 falls, then it's not going to be exactly clear how white's going to win this. But unfortunately, because c5 falls, it's just too much poison in this position. Black can't survive this. But I had an idea, and it didn't work. But again, even though it doesn't work, you've got to be able to analyze these things, okay? Because sometimes it might be the only saving move, and as it turns out, it isn't. We'll see where this game turns here in a little bit. But white's getting all the play, and now the bishops are starting to get squares. Now, since the knight is driven away from f6, the bishop can occupy this diagonal, and it has a threat, and it's pinning a knight. So he says simple and very effective. I agree. Now black has to weaken his king position a little bit, and he expected it, and he says the open position will only favor white, and I agree. Okay, so now white parts with that bishop right now on d7, and he says a no-brainer to make him spend even more time with his knight while I focus on my attack. Okay, you'll see it makes sense, but an interesting candidate move to consider is just bishop e6. Now why play a move like that? Well, it's because it's not clear how black's going to evict that bishop. Okay, that's why. Black does not have a bishop of his own of that color, so sticking it there just gives black all the more things to worry about. Black makes an exchange, and it makes black's defense just a little bit easier. In other words, when white takes, black's able to spend no time on his clock and retake. Okay, so if you play bishop e6, black might spend 5, 10, 15 minutes on this move. Okay, and who knows? Maybe my idea of taking on c6 comes into play. As a matter of fact, I think black does that soon enough. We'll see. But bishop e6 is not a bad move. Neither is the move he played. As you'll see, it's a forcing continuation, and the idea is to open up this file. Now suddenly this bishop on e3 is going to spring to life. So this does look pretty good. I'm just thinking bishop e6 was more complex. But anyway, black doesn't want that file opening up. And he says, white says, "Phooey, now your pony is pinned." And here white makes a prophylactic move. He just parks his king in the corner. Just avoids some possible discovered checks at some point. And not a bad idea. And now white's bishop's ready to spring to life. So here, okay, here black does my idea. He does take the knight on c6 to get rid of pressure. And let's see, his note is, "I can't say this is bad. He has a lost position anyway and gets a pawn for the exchange." Well, I'm not so sure it's definitely lost, and I'll explain why in a moment. Theoretically it's lost, but practically it's got some nuisance value to it, and we'll see here in a minute. Okay, so now black wastes a move. But really, what else does he do? He's gonna have to stay where he's at, pretty much. Maybe somehow, maybe queen a6 or queen a8, put a little pressure on a2. But black wastes a move, but it's okay. And there he pins the knight again. And this is where black basically throws the game away. And let's stop and take stock. For the exchange or the quality, black has a pawn compensation. But once again, let's look at this in theory. These pawns aren't going anywhere. They've lost their mobility. Okay, this leaves white with this 2-to-1 pawn majority, and so eventually, at some point, they're going to have to advance, either in the middle, still in the middle game, or in the ending. But waiting in the wings, look at this pawn chain. Okay, that's a rock solid pawn chain, and if white gets a little too carried away conducting his own operations, those pawns could get active in a hurry. And I'm not advocating running them now, but it might not be a bad idea. So candidate moves, I've basically got two candidate moves for black here. One is to play d5 and see if you can't get him running. Okay, the idea is to try to follow up with c4 and get some passed pawns. But the other idea, what's weak in black's position? e7 and g6. Okay, and white doesn't have any minor pieces. He's only got the heavy artillery. So what I'm thinking is, since these pawns are not going anywhere, they're not doing anything for white, what about just a careful rook retreat move right here, rook a8. Okay, what this accomplishes quite a bit. Okay, for one, black has an idea of playing rook h8 and rook takes h3, winning a pawn. Okay, that's one idea behind it. The other idea behind it is that the rook can come over and help the king out in case white can somehow muster something. Now, what can white attack? Well, attacking g6 is going to be hard. How does white get a rook on that square? Well, he can do it. Rook f3, rook g3. That takes two moves. Then you have to get the queen on it. Okay. Well, black's got some moves too to make. And if anything, maybe this rook can get to h6 and keep pressure on the h file. And you know, this black queen is ideally posted. It's on a nice diagonal. And then maybe if white gets his rooks, tries to do too much with the rooks on the king side, maybe black can go back and use this idea and try to get a passed pawn and get some counterplay. It's not clear to me exactly what White's winning plan here is. Um, uh, Ideally, you'd say, well, win it in the ending. Okay, well, it may not be that easy. Okay, in theory, it should be a win, but in practice, I'm thinking Black's holding on here pretty well. He's just going to sit and blockade. How are you going to get rid of the material? Okay, let's take a look. Okay, we'll play one line out for the fun of it right here. I haven't even looked at this. Queen f2. The idea is eventually to play queen f3 and get the queens off. Okay, so let's suppose Black goes with his plan that I suggested and plays rook h8. Okay, and now White does what he wants. Now, you know what? Let's humor White. Let's take it off. Okay, now we're going to swing this rook back. Okay, now you've got to watch a2. Okay, fine. Now, I want to get this knight better posted. e5, d4, and c3 all look like tremendous squares. Let's put this knight on e4. Okay, now I'm keeping your rook out of f2. So maybe White wants to bring his king closer. Okay, now if we play knight c3, then rook f2 might be embarrassing. So we can actually play d5 here. Now this knight is secure. Okay, this knight is very secure. If White attacks d5, then Black can support it with e6. It's not clear exactly how White maneuvers here. So the only thing I can think of is let's get these pawns going. Okay, now Black just plays preventive maintenance here. Now a nice subtle move. Let's guard the 7th rank. Get this going. Now I'm saying to you, go ahead. Come into the W rooks. Now White's tied down to guarding a2. Now we've got d4 covered. c5 is covered. Let's play e5. See, I mean, White can probably improve on this play, but to me, it's not clear how White wins. White's winning materially, but positionally, he's got his work cut out for him. That's the point I have to make. And sometimes, when you have to fight back in chess, this is how you do it. Now look at those center pawns. They look pretty good. And White's finally about to get his objective, get a pass pawn on the king side, but it may be too far advanced and off by itself if White does that. It may be either number one, lost, or number two, just ignored because White can't do anything with it. White's tied down to watching a2 in the center. Those pawns are coming up the board. There's very little White can do about this. Let's just go ahead and play the pass pawn move. Okay, let's get this running. Okay, take. I don't have to take back. That's pawn's. Let's just take it and get it over with. Bring the king up. Let's attack your rook. Got to keep you honest. And look at those pawns. They're trouble. One's ready to run to d3. White could be losing this, and he hasn't generated anything. But anyway, Black didn't play this. He didn't. He basically fell apart. And let's get to where it happened. I'm gonna go back in the PGN. Okay, what Black played was e5 instead of my suggestion, and this just creates a weakness on f6 that White tactically exploits, and he does it very nicely. Because if White doesn't find this, maybe those pawns do become dangerous. So this attacks the knight, and look, it has to move. Black can't defend it with his pieces. Yeah, he can here, but here comes a little tactical shot. You had to give up a pawn to do it, And now a queen sacrifice. It's just a temporary sacrifice, and he has to accept. But now white just drives the king away from protection of the queen, and voila. And now white's a rook up, and those center pass pawns aren't going anywhere. They've been neutralized, and now white just coordinates his pieces and forces a mating net, and does it very nicely. And it doesn't really matter what black plays. I'm just kind of running through the moves. The game is over. White's going to win, and now he just has a little combination, and voila, checkmate. So I thought the level of play was well above the rating level here. You know, if somebody had said both these players were rated 18 or 1900, I would believe that. And but they weren't. This is what the ratings there are. I guess it's translated from the British ratings, but nonetheless, we are capable of every now and then of playing a game above our rating. Our rating is just an average. You know, we have stinkers too, which bring our ratings back down. But on any given game, we can play a class or two above what our rating is, and this is what it is. This is a best game thread, and you have everything to be proud of. But going back to the critical position, when black blundered with e5, I think just rook a8. Black's got chances to hold on to this. E7 can be covered. White's going probably what white's going to have to do is break the. You know, I gave the idea of a queen trade, but double the rooks on the f file so that the king is shielded, and then advance the pawn majority. Try to crack them open, but black's going to find some counterplay here if he does it correctly. And even if the black king has to run for the hills, maybe this king could find his way over here somewhere, hide behind his pawns, and then if black keeps enough wood on the board to keep that pawn from advancing, you know, this knight is wedged in there. I just imagine this king on d7 that supports e7, and if white ends up with a passed pawn, the knight will secure h7 and transfer something else to the rook file, or maybe even the queen on e4, which is a nice centralizing square. That covers h7, blockading everything. This pawn would be gone on g6. But white's work's cut out for him, but it would be good practice, because the only way you're going to find out about these endings is to actually play them. And it makes a good exercise for white to set this position up and say, what do I do now? I've given you some ideas. It's not clear to me exactly what white's winning plan is. Like I say, objectively, white's got more material. By a pawn count, it's a count of 1. But as the lines I showed, black ended up with a winning position, and simply because those pawns got going, it's not clear how white's going to make progress. So, good game. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care.